Hello, my name's Elijah Wells, and today's review is Haru Tsuchimaki's new movie, Demon Slayer: Infinity Castle. Taking place right after the events of the finale of Season 4, Muzan has essentially trapped all of the Demon Slayer Corps into his own little Infinity Mansion, or his little Infinity Castle, which essentially just expands and completely shifts shape whenever it feels like it, almost in the same essence as, say, like the Tesseract from Interstellar or Houses of Leaves, the book. But while they're all down there, Tanjiro and the gang have to face off like a whole horde of demons before eventually trying to reach up to the big baddie that is Muzan. Demon Slayer in Japan, being big and popular as it is underselling it a little bit, particularly with Mugen Train, which is not just considered one of the biggest anime movies of all time, but also one of the biggest films from Japan of all time. So much so that it became the first movie to gross $500 million in a post-pandemic world, as in this movie pretty much single-handedly saved cinema. And of course, Demon Slayer had, of course, going into a really hot streak when it comes to their theatrical outings, particularly on the more compilation films like To the Swordsman's Village, to Hoshira Training, which again, they're essentially compilation films, as in they featured the last episode of the previous season and have like 2 or 1 episodes of the next upcoming season. Even though I didn't particularly care for these particular films, just because I'm like paying for like a third of a film I've already seen already. But however, Infinity Castle is incredibly different from what Demon Slayer has put out for the last couple of years. Particularly, this is the first installment of a trilogy that essentially represents the final season of the series, that is Demon Slayer. Particularly with Tanjiro and the gang pretty much having an all-out war, pretty much at Muzan's place, being the Infinity Castle. And of course, right now as we're speaking, it's breaking all sorts of box office records in both anime terms and as well as in Japan. But not just that, even news has just went out being one of the highest opening weekends for a foreign film, and of course one of the best R-rated animated movies, like highest grossing rise of all time. Like the amount of records it's breaking, it's already probably more consequential than Mugen Train. Particularly with Demon Slayer's key strengths are definitely being played to its full advantage, particularly in this movie, particularly the fight choreography and its animation, which is not just really beautiful at many moments and dazzlingly and just absolutely crazy, but it does, particularly in a more cinema setting, it becomes full-blown sensory overload. More to the point, it's pretty much rivaling something like a Death Grips or a Prodigy concert, like the amount of insane visual and sonic imagery that the movie just completely throws into you, particularly in these battle scenes, and how really fast-paced they are. It pretty much goes to show that, particularly in these way more fast and more dazzling scenes, and as well the more of the scenes with flashback where the movie does somewhat slow down a little bit, the animation does work in these situations really well. Particularly how really gorgeous they are and how really beautifully done they are, regardless of what situation the animation is in. And the action scenes in this movie, although it largely consists of the 3 action scenes in the movie being Tanjiro and Gyro taking on Asuka being one of them, as well as Zenitsu taking on his former senior being Kaguku. Sorry if I mispronounced the names because I've watched it in subs. And of course there's Shinobu, who faces off Doma. Or pretty much these are the 3 fights that you're going to mostly see in the movie, as in, even though the fight scenes are incredible at best, I feel like the Zenitsu one is definitely the most explosive and the most flashy, given that his lightning abilities are definitely at full display in this movie. Then somewhat peters out in the around the halfway point in the movie when Tanjiro and Gyro pretty much take over the rest of the movie, in my opinion. Now, of course, their battle with Alcazar, particularly as a revenge from the events of the ending of the Mugen Train, it pretty much does come full circle. It does it is very visually satisfying, as both narrative-wise and of course visually as well, in its animation and how much depth there is in the animation, which is again really good. I did unfortunately had a couple of problems with the Demon Slayer Infinity Castle movie. Particularly, there was the flashback with Akazan, who it pretty much goes on for quite a bit. Like, It was so much so I feel like it just went on for quite a surprisingly a lot longer than it kind of should have done. Like, I swear it went on for like a whole episode's worth of its time. Like the movie is again like pretty long, as in like 2 hours and 35 minutes, which is again really long for an animated film, but it's also the same length as the Evangelion Thrice Upon a Time movie, which is again the finale piece of the Evangelion series. But this is essentially the first installment of the a trilogy, so I imagine it's going to either really fluctuate or go have the same consistent runtime, or just go longer and longer with each passing installment. But particularly with the flashback with the Agazans, which again feels like it just went on and on. But I imagine it may be like Mugen Train, where it's going to be re-edited into a series in an episodic form, and maybe that entire flashback sequence where he was a thief, went to do dojo, found out his master got poisoned, and pretty much goes on a killing spree. I imagine that will be suited for like a whole episode's worth. Like, it just kind of went on for quite a bit, to be honest. And there's also like a couple of issues, like as much as the fight scenes are amazing, the story is again fairly uneven at best. Like, we only see like Shinjabu and Setsugu and Tanjiro and Gairo. Again, what about the rest of the Demon Corps? But again, I imagine this is more fleshed out in the manga and the other two films, or they're just trying to separate it out for the upcoming two movies. But we barely get to see like Nezuko or Inuzuke, who are barely even in this movie at all. Like, I imagine again they'll contribute a lot more as the trilogy progresses. But however, again, the storyline is not exactly favouring these two, and the pacing in that film is a little bit awkward in my opinion. Like, particularly what I really like about the action scenes, particularly in the series, that the pacing just never stops, as it keeps going, go. Like, it just gives you a whole ride of like a complete amazing fight scenes, and of course the action's incredible, and how the pacing pretty much accommodates that. It's again really incredible how it does it. Like, it pretty much stays on a really fast pace, and it goes really consistently on that speed. Then the flashbacks happen, as in the movie somewhat grinds to a halt with these flashbacks, as in it comes off like it goes really fast, then it stops, then it goes on for quite a bit, then movie had to like gradually build up momentum back again, particularly with the pacing, as in like you pretty much killed the momentum of its movie, given that the pacing of the flashbacks and the fight scenes are so contrastly very different that you have to rebuild the pacing all over again, pretty much starting from square one. The movie primarily takes place in the one setting, being the Infinity Castle. Like I said in the intro, like, it is such a fascinatingly big place, as in the movie pretty much establishes how really big it is, even though in the series it does again elaborate that it's again a very big place, and particularly in the film, if you haven't seen the series, it does a really good job to introduce you that we're in the Infinity Castle and it is far as you can see, and all the buildings can shift pretty much from one place to another, and it can transform into another building, and it merge into one building, separate into one building. It's pretty much like the Tesseract from Interstellar, where it's such a wide, almost like unearthly sculpture that you can stretch for miles and miles at the end, and it pretty much never changes. And of course it does like transform into something else, particularly as it goes on, or something like the book I really want to read at some point, something like Houses of Leaves, from an author's name who I'm not going to pronounce properly just because it's very difficult, but his first name is Mark. It's pretty much about a house that pretty much transforms around the people that live there. Again, pretty much changes dimensions, pretty much similar to Infinity Castle, and particularly in the ending where it turns out it gets a lot bigger. Like, when you thought this is big, then the second film, it gets a lot bigger. So it's pretty much very telling how much thought there was put into the world building of that as well. Like, it's just the one location and it's absolutely massive. Even though I don't want to completely clap down on the flashbacks once again, but I feel like I want to give the flashbacks One more piece of credit besides the very gorgeous animation they all built, as in they all what they have in common is that they have a lot of emotional weight, like a lot of emotions are definitely hanging off this movie, and all these characters that were fighting all these demons, and the demon being Asuka also has his own personal demons, no pun intended. Again, a lot of stuff like pretty much goes down in their background, how it's so deeply rooted, but once they fight a demon, it's not necessarily bottles up and just explodes, as in it just arises to their moment, and they pretty much use their own backstory to pretty much yield it to their advantage, like Jinjabu losing her sister, and Zezuko, and Zetsu, who had a fraught relationship with his master and grandfather, and of course there's Asuka, who was a thief, then did a dojo class, and his master got killed, and of course had a huge murder spree. Again, a lot of emotional weight, despite pacing issues that pretty much completely bombard the movie here and there. The first installment of the Infinity Castle trilogy does get off to a solid start at best. Definitely the movie has its major strong points, particularly with its amazingly gorgeous animation, its incredible and very scenic fight scenes, and also the backstories of the character. They give it a lot more emotional richness and textureness in this movie. But the movie isn't exactly perfect either, as in the movie's, albeit pretty daunting length, somewhat gets bogged down with backstories that somewhat kill the pacing of this movie and kill the momentum of this movie, and the story that at best should be like somewhat of a Lord of the Rings, where the movies are perfect as one, but as a trilogy they're even more perfect. But however, with this Inception, where the story-wise it's so pretty much uneven that we never exactly keep that much of a tabs on all the other characters that are fighting their own battle against Muzan and all his demon goons, as we always look at the small section of characters that the movie essentially concentrates a lot of its energy on, which again, even though despite of its amazing animation, despite of its flaws like its pacing and its runtime, I feel like this is a somewhat of a shaky yet solid start to a trilogy. So for Demon Slayer Infinity Castle, I'm feeling a 7 out of 10 on this one. So, what do you think of Demon Slayer Infinity Castle? Let me know in the comments down below, like this video, subscribe to my channel, and of course follow me on Twitter, Instagram, Letterboxd, Blue Sky and Threads, and this is Elijah Wells, and bye!